Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Rise. I'm Bridget Howard, and joining me today is none other than the incredibly talented Adam Amin. Adam, we're so glad you could come on the podcast today, but like we were just talking about, you're the first male guest, so this is a big deal.
No, I hope I carry the mantle properly. I don't know if that's a thing. If it is, I'll try, and if it's not, I'll just hopefully enjoy the next hour with you, man. I'm happy to be here to talk to you.
Well, thanks so much. And we're actually going to just dive right in. And, you know, we talk about so much how everyone's path in this industry is so unique. But what really fascinated me about yours was how what got you into the industry was the theater of the mind aspect and the storytelling part of things. So for those who are unfamiliar with your journey, why were those such big factors in you pursuing this career?
I think there's a certain level of emotional connectivity that comes with broadcasting sports and just sports in general. I think that's probably what draws a lot of us into it. I understand that for people like me who come from a very specific area, I'm from Chicago originally, and there's a very provincial nature to connecting with your sports teams. Like, that's part of the culture of it. But why is it such a big part of the culture? It's typically because people have some kind of emotional connectivity to it. Oh, I went to this game with my brother or my dad or my mom, and I fell in love with the team, or the first time I went to a game, this happened, or I got to meet this player at a autograph signing, and that became my favorite team. Whatever it is, there's a million different stories like that. That's a very narrow angle to look through, and there's a lot more beyond just that kind of sucks people into being fans of whatever team they're fans of. So I think there's a lot of emotional connectivity to this. I think the reason that athletes do what they do and are driven in a certain fashion to do very special and unique things, there's stories behind those, and I think that allows us to connect with them a little bit better. Especially, I think the biggest thing too, I think the reason we like sports so much is because for the most part, these are people who are doing things that most of us, if not all of us, cannot physically do. I can't hit a ball 400 feet to center field. I can't slam dunk. I can't shoot a 30-foot three-pointer, which I know will be a shock to all of us who are listening to this, but I can't do those things. So when people are able to do these physical feats, that's impressive to me. I think that's impressive to most of us as human beings. So when we have the ability to watch that and then humanize those people to make them more relatable to the other parts of us, I think that's a key in connecting people. And because it's such a communal thing, sports in general, it's nice to have a lot of people in this tent. And I think the easiest way to get a lot of people in this tent is to be a good storyteller and be able to relate these athletes to the people that watch them on a daily basis.
You went to Valparaiso for college, graduated in 2009. How were you able to really find your footing there in broadcasting and take advantage of the opportunities you had there?
Yeah, my college experience essentially was it. It was the thing that got me a great understanding of what this job entailed. I didn't know I wanted to do this when I was a kid. I have a lot of friends who are in this business who knew they wanted to do this when they were 6 or when they were 8 or when they were 10 or when they were 12. And I just wasn't one of those people. I didn't know. I knew what this was. I knew like who the local announcers were, and I listened to them with my dad and my brothers, just like a lot of other people did. And you connect certain moments with those voices, but I didn't understand or grasp that concept. I didn't really know that this was like a job. So for me, I didn't really know I could do this until I got to college. I had a time in high school where I messed around with this a little bit, but it wasn't really something that I was thinking about. And then I had a friend of mine who was going to Valparaiso, who was a few years older than me, from my hometown, and said, if you want to try this, if you want to give it a shot, like, I'm going to be running the student radio station next year. If you want to come here, like, we'll put you on if you're looking for somewhere to go. So I applied, I got in, and the first day I showed up on campus and went to the advisor. I was like, my friend told me to come here. What do I do? Like, where do I go? And, they brought me into this musty radio station with a very dusty couch and a bad production room. And I was like, yeah, this is where I want to be. So I really kind of dove headfirst into the radio aspect of it, which probably only increased the storytelling and the theater of the mind and all of that when you kind of understand how to do the job. So my 4 years there were huge because we got to do everything. We got to cover the basketball games and football games, and we worked in studio, and we got to do color, and we got to do play-by-play. So all of these different facets of the job were part of my college experience. And we were given a lot of free reign to be really, really bad at this. And I think everybody needs that. Everybody needs a little bit of space to just suck at this job in whatever capacity you want to do it. You have to be bad at it so that you can realize what makes somebody good at this job. And we got a lot of free reign in that sense.
I think that's so important, especially in college, just because like I look back at my time and I was like, gosh, I tried so hard to be perfect, but that was, a time where it's okay to mess up, like the people that are putting you on the air know, hey, she's probably going to mess up or he's probably going to mess up. So it's important to like take advantage of those opportunities, because then once you get out of college, like that's your gig. Like you don't want to mess up. You got to be on your A game.
It's so true. I just remember we had the chance to do like this Lutheran basketball American tournament, like this national tournament. They played at Valparaiso. It's a Lutheran school, so they host this tournament. And it's like 12 and 13-year-olds playing like basketball. It's like 6th and 7th grade basketball. And they're like, oh yeah, we're going to have like a 1-camera stream for all of these games, which are, they're taking place like 6 or 10 at a time on all these different courts. And they commissioned us as student broadcasters to like call these games, and we treated it like it was the NBA finals. It was great. And it was, I think, the first time we were given like that sense that you're talking about, like just go and do it. And like, no, people are just going to be happy that somebody's talking about their kids while they're playing basketball. Just get their names right. That's all anybody cares about. If you have to ask the coach just how to say a name, just ask. That's the only thing anybody cares about. They want their name to be said properly, and everything else is yours essentially to learn and experiment and try things. And we got to call like 20 games in a weekend for, a few years at a time. And I just remember experiences like that being so essential, not only to like getting better at this, because, by sheer volume, you're supposed to get better. Every time you do it, the goal is to be a little bit better than the last time you did it. And it was that, like, that's great, but it was wonderful to just get just do it. Just go do it and see if you like it. That's what I try to tell a lot of people too. Like, do everything you can in this business when you first start out, because you need to figure out not only what you're good at and what you're bad at, but like, what do you like? What's the part of this job that you enjoy? What's the part of this profession that you really want to pursue that you're not going to get deterred by when the things aren't going particularly well? And that was an important lesson for me to learn too, as I'm sure it is for a lot of people. Like, my first job out of college was not one that I particularly loved in terms of all the aspects of it. I loved the job. I loved broadcasting, but I didn't love waking up at 4:30 in the morning to do a 6 to 10 a.m. like pop culture morning show. It wasn't my thing. I wasn't particularly good at it, and it just wasn't for me. Like, I didn't really want to go compile stories and do like a rundown and be an anchor. It's not really my thing. I can do it if you need me to, and I'm glad I had all these experiences that give me some confidence. If you have to throw me into one of these situations, I'm perfectly good doing those things, but I didn't love those things. And the thing that I loved was, even after being awake for 12, 13 hours, driving the hour and a half to whatever small town south of you. And, I was in Spirit Lake, Iowa, and we're driving, down to Pocahontas to do the doubleheader girls and boys basketball games that night. That's the time of the night that I was really looking forward to. And I'm like, that's what makes me happiest. So I left that job to go pursue another job, which was strictly a play-by-play job, because I knew that's where I wanted to have my focus. And I think those opportunities in college, and I tell students all the time, like, just do everything, because it's huge for you to even get the opportunity to be on air. And the more you can do it, the more you'll figure out what you like and what you don't like. And the more you do that one specifically, you'll figure out what's good and what's bad about it, and you can adjust accordingly.
Well, and no job is too small, quite frankly, when you're in college and getting the opportunities. Like, we always talk about reps and just how important getting the reps are. So it's like, even if you're driving to Pocahontas, do whatever, like, to go to these places that are such small schools, and you're still getting the opportunity to be on air, practice your craft. And like you said, you get better each and every time. So I think that's a really good point, because, that is a good time to figure out what you like and what you don't like. And, because once you get out of college, it's like, all right, you got to really narrow it down and figure out what you like, or you're not going to be a very happy person.
Did you figure that out? Like, do you think you figured that out at the right time? Are you still figuring that out? Like, well, how was that for you?
I think I'm still figuring it out a little bit. It's just a crazy time. Like, I had my job right out of college that I loved, but, COVID happened, unfortunately. And so that position got eliminated. But I did take different opportunities in college. I tried out radio for a little bit. I did, the sideline reporting was my big thing, and hosting some shows. I got some opportunities every once in a while, but I wish I would have taken a little more more opportunities and just been willing to put myself out there a little more. And I think that's my biggest piece of advice to people is it's like, don't be afraid to mess up. Cause that was me. I'm a perfectionist by nature. and so I never wanted to mess up. I always wanted to be prepared. So that is one thing that I wish I would have done more of, is just take any opportunity, not just, the ones that are on the ESPN Plus or, the ones that seem bigger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I had a lot of those. And like, even when I was in Iowa, like I had my first like real TV opportunity when I was in Iowa, and I like had to bug my bosses, like, can I get Friday off so that I can drive back to Illinois to go do like the high school volleyball championships in the middle of, I can't remember if it was November or December, but like I asked for like a weekend off, which I was really scared to do because I just started this job like a month and a half, 2 months prior. And I'm like, this is something I have to do. Like, you can't like, it was good money, like, which I wasn't making at the time, whatever that means relative to you at age 22. Like I was desperate for it. And it was a huge opportunity, and it was with like one of my closest friends. So I really wanted to do that. So I took that job, and I drove overnight to get to, central Illinois to go do a weekend of volleyball matches and then drive back to Iowa right after. When I went to New Jersey, I had a bunch of freelance opportunities during the summer, and I had to jam them in between doing minor league baseball games. And then in that off season, like I said, I left the job, a full-time job in Iowa in radio, to go do a minor league baseball team. And that was scary because it was seasonal. I didn't have benefits. I didn't have like insurance or anything like that. It was just, we're going to pay you this. You're going to live in a hotel. You're going to pack up your suitcase every time you leave for a road trip because you don't want to pay for the nights that you're not staying at the hotel because you can't afford it. So, there was that. And then, oh, by the way, the season's over. You don't have a job now. We'll see you in April. So, freelancing on your own. And granted, but let me also say, I was living with my parents. I had that stability there. I had that cushion, and I know not everybody has that cushion. So let me be very specific and very direct in saying, like, I was very fortunate in that sense. But like, that's what that whole winter was driving to Louisville, Kentucky, or driving to Indianapolis, or driving to Wisconsin, and putting on a lot of miles and a lot of prep work for people that you never heard of. And it's fine. That's the job. That's going to be the job probably for the rest of your life if you want to do it that way. So I wanted to have that experience, and it taught me a lot of independence. It taught me a lot of time management. It taught me how to kind of balance a lot of things. And I really had to learn that fast, because then you are kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and you are in a little bit more of a pressure packed situation, just as a human being trying to, have a life in America. Like you're just living, essentially paycheck to paycheck. Again, I had a cushion, but that being said, like, I didn't want the cushion. I wanted to kind of be out on my own. So taking advantage of all those opportunities probably accelerated my growth process in a significant way, and obviously having a lot of people around to critique and listen to you and tell you what you're doing well and what you're doing poorly. Those things were huge in those early years before, you catch your big break, so to speak.
Well, we talked about it a little bit, but all the different jobs you had, in college and after college before you joined ESPN. And like, it's so easy to get carried away with the comparison game. And we've talked about this a lot, at least amongst women, in the industry. And so from a guy's perspective, like, there's like play-by-play is so competitive with men. Like, I mean, that's all you see. And, there's more women getting into that, position now. But how were you able to separate yourself amongst the other broadcasters vying for that same position? Yeah, it's
very competitive. I think the business in general, male, female, and regardless of job, it doesn't really matter. I think there's just a level of competitiveness because of all the things we talked about earlier with why it's a fun job and why people have connectivity to it. Everybody wants to do that. Everybody wants to do something that, they enjoy, but that gives them a little bit of a personal satisfaction. And telling a good story and kind of relating something to other people. When you have a good broadcast, when you write a good piece, when you have a good story to tell as a reporter, whatever it may be, you get some satisfaction out of that personally because you put something into it and you got something out of it. And because of that, people want to pursue positions like that. And that's why this is such a competitive business, because there's just so many people who want to do it. And everybody's trying to figure out how to be good at it, or what is good to one person or to one executive or one decision maker. Like, what do they like? And what do I bring that fits that mold? So for me, like I was saying, all those like little jobs, the freelance jobs, the doing minor league baseball for a team where I was in the booth every day by myself for, a few hours at a time, learning how to construct stories and learning how to create a narrative for a particular game and how it fits into the narrative of the entire season. All the little nuanced things like how to use your voice, what the inflection needs to be, volume, the pitch that you use, the words that you use, what your vocabulary is like. All of these things get developed by osmosis, partially because you're just thrust into it. You have to learn it. Otherwise, you're going to bore yourself. You're going to be stale, and you're going to feel that, and fans are going to feel that too. So you're doing this, on a whim at times. Like, all right, I'm going to use this word and see if it works, and hope it does. Because if it doesn't, I'm never going to use it again. And like all those little jobs allowed that space to kind of learn. There are high stakes for all of us when we're starting out, because we're like, oh, this has to be a good broadcast because this is going to be my resume tape, or this has to be a good inning because I need to put this on my demo reel. And all of those kind of, you're kind of putting your own pressure on it, but those pressure-packed moments really accelerated my growth process. So being in the booth as much as I was, and you said it, and you used the word reps. I'm a reps guy. I needed reps. I'm not somebody who I believe is naturally talented at this. And I have friends of mine who in all positions, who I just look at and I go, how are you this naturally good at this? Like, you're meant to do this. You're meant to be in front of people and presenting something, and you do it so well at such a young age. I don't understand it. And I did not feel like I was one of those people. So I felt like I needed to do it over and over and over, and pour over tape and pour over the recording of that night's broadcast. Or, hey, can I get the DVD of that 3-camera Division II softball game that we were doing, because I need to see if I was good or not. And then you just rip it apart. And I was very critical of myself, and still am in a lot of ways. Less so now, because I think you find some comfort eventually. But at that point, I was so critical, and I was beating myself up a lot, which is probably not a good thing. But I had a lot of good people in my corner, whether it was friends, whether it was people that you meet along the way that you network with, or that you reach out to, older broadcasters, more veteran, seasoned broadcasters, people that you're close with, people that you have connections with. And I'm sure I bothered a lot of people and I use the word bother specifically. I'm sure they were bothered by me at various points. I hope that's not the case, but it felt like it at times. But they were kind enough and gracious enough to look at it and just say, this is good, keep doing this. This needs work on this. Here's one way how. And it's just little notes like that you compile over a long period of time, over the course of several conversations, electronic and in person, that you just kind of build this database and apply it to your own personality and your own skill set and try to figure it out. And pouring over that tape constantly and getting other people's critiques and getting other people's perspectives on it, people that I respected and people that I look up to, that I still look up to this day, that really made it move quicker. And I think that got me to a point from age 22 to 24, from finishing at Valpo to going to Iowa to going to New Jersey, and having a stop in Gary, Indiana with baseball, and doing all these freelance jobs. All those experiences kind of stacked on top of one another. And it built a database of information and adjustments very fast. And I think I was good enough to recognize those adjustments and figure out what I needed to do to get better at all these different specific skill sets that apply to the greater skill set that you're putting together as a broadcaster. So that was huge. And that really got me to a point where I felt not comfortable, but I felt a little bit more confident in what I was doing. And I think that was a really big key, just to feel like somebody injecting some confidence into you is such a big key at that age, at that point of your development as a broadcaster. I think that was essential for me.
It completely changes things because I've been there, and like I'm currently there, and I think it is so important. I talked about it on last week's episode with Taylor McGregor.
Yep.
It is so important to have people in your corner who you can go to and who will be honest with you. And like I said last week, I would quite literally trust some of these people with my life. And to have people like that in your corner is so important, especially in this industry, who aren't going to sugarcoat things for you. And I really like the phrase you use, like the database of like, things, advice that they give you, because I literally have a notes sheet on my phone of things that people say, or like I'll watch things on Twitter of good questions I hear people ask, and I'll write them down. And like, it's just, I think by nature we like to get critiqued, or like to, have advice, take advice and everything, just so we can always get better. And so I've been there. I understand that. and
I'm a big dumb dog, basically. Like I'm a dumb puppy. So just like pat me on the head or hit me on the nose and tell me what I did right or tell me what I did wrong, and I'll try to adjust for the next time. Like it's as simple for me. It's as simple as that. And that developed over time too. Like when you're 22 and you're being told something, you think it's the end of the world. And when I'm 34 now and I'm being told something, it doesn't feel like the end of the world. But sometimes it still does. And I never have figured out truly how to navigate that, but I just try harder now not to beat myself up over it the way I did, 10 years ago. So that's part of not just the professional growth process, but I think that's more of like, just, you go from your 20s to your 30s, like you're supposed to grow emotionally and mature as an individual. So I think that's part of that. I think the combination of doing a job that puts yourself out there, like you are out there you are exposing yourself in a lot of different ways, like what you look like, what you sound like, the things that you say, the words that you use, the questions that you structure, all of that gets critiqued by however many people are listening or watching in a split second. And they may move past it, or they may get on Twitter and say something that you don't care for, or that's not particularly constructive, or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that's right, but I'm saying that's how it is. And trying to navigate through that as well is a little bit of its own minefield, and it's not fun all the time. But I think the more you can take, not even necessarily the positives, it doesn't have to be just listening to the positive stuff. It's taking things and applying them to your own perspective. Like, all right, this person said something mean. Do they have a point about what they were saying otherwise? All right, maybe they do. Let me think about that in some way, and maybe it'll apply to the next one. Or maybe I'm going to say, forget that person. I hate that person. Who cares about what that person thinks? I'm just going to do the job as I need to do it. But all of that goes into some portion of your brain, and you process it based on whether it fits you or it doesn't fit you. And I try to say that to younger broadcasters. I'm going to tell you what I think you did well or did wrong. And if it doesn't fit what you think you want to do, just disregard it. You do not have to listen to what I'm saying. This is just what I thought. And that's another important lesson, is one person's opinion is one person's opinion. And based on your level of respect for them, you're going to take it at a certain degree. And if it's coming from a random source that you don't really feel like taking that criticism from, that's okay too. You don't have to take every piece of criticism and apply it and turn it into a complete indictment of what it is that you're doing. So that's another like emotional minefield that I've had to work hard to try to navigate through over the last, decade and a half.
There's a quote, and I'm probably going to completely butcher it, but you might know what I'm talking about. It's like, if you wouldn't take advice or look up to someone, then like don't take what they say personally. That kind of thing. I know that I'm not saying it correctly, but along those lines. And that is something that has always stuck in my head, because I'm like, if you're not looking at them and being like, wow, I like what they do, like why would you care what they say about you? And so that's kind of how I've framed things. I ask people for their opinions when like I know what they do is really good, and like I look up to them. So yeah, it's definitely kind of one of those where like take it with a grain of salt if you don't think it's going to help you, but you got to have thick skin in this industry, and that's it.
Well, Taylor said it on your show, I think last week. She said like trust builds confidence, and I know she was specifically talking about her job. Like players trust, managers trust, coaches trust in you will breed confidence, and they'll feel comfortable telling you things. I think that's probably a very insightful statement to make across the board in a lot of different ways in this. Like if you trust somebody, you're going to have confidence in what they tell you, and that's important to to your own development, I think just having people around you that you look up to and trust, and that's a good lesson, I think, in general, in life in general, is to surround yourself with people that you do trust and that you and whose opinions you take to heart, because you know it comes from a place of either skill or understanding of you as a person and as a broadcaster. And you know, Joe Davis and Wayne Randazzo are two of my closest friends. They're, you know, the voices of the Dodgers and the Mets respectively on TV and radio, and Joe and I are colleagues at Fox. And we all came up in minor league baseball together, and I immediately made a connection with those two guys, and I immediately went to them as soon as they were the first people I went to anytime I had a question, or, hey, can you listen to this? I don't know if this was good. Is this good enough for a demo reel? Please listen to this. And I would do the same for them. And another thing that kind of accelerated all of our processes and all of our skill sets was probably being honest with one another. And I knew that if I went to Joe or I went to Wayne, I was going to get an honest critique and truly honest feedback about what I was good at, what I sucked at, and what I needed to work on. And they knew that they would get the same from me. And that's only grown over the years. And that's grown with a lot of people over the years. You formulate those bonds, and you formulate, you know, you're kind of in this, you know, foxhole together, so to speak. And you're all trying to battle through, you know, all these different mazes and labyrinths of this industry. And when you've done that with people, you breed that confidence with one another. And I trust those people to tell me if I'm doing something well or doing something poorly. And if they say it, I'm going to take it to heart.
Let's take a moment to talk about Sage, our sponsor for Season 2 of The Rise. For many of us who are on air, finding pieces that are both stylish and affordable are sometimes hard to come by. This season, The Rise is sponsored by Sage, an online boutique that is dedicated to helping women find looks that help you accomplish your life goals while feeling confident and looking great. Use the code THERISE20 for 20% off your next purchase at shopsage.com, and make sure to follow at ShopSage on Instagram for updates on new arrivals and more. 2 years after you graduated from Valparaiso, you get a job at ESPN, which is the worldwide leader in sports. 2 years out of college is insane and so awesome to get that opportunity. But while you were there, you had so many cool opportunities. You got to do the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest, Women's College World Series, High School All-American Games. And something I've always wanted to ask, and you're also the first one on the podcast whose main role is being play-by-play as opposed to a sideline reporter or host. So how do you get ready for those events when you're asked to do them, and getting familiar with the sport or the event that you're covering to be like, hey, I know enough about this where I feel comfortable going out there and talking about this hot dog eating contest for however many hours?
Yeah, because I think, you know, we all have this idea that, all right, we're going to cover baseball, basketball, football, hockey, and then just call it a day. Like, that's not the case at a place that has a major diversity.
Footprint.
Yeah, and people, that's a great word for it too, footprint, because like ESPN is saying, like, we're going to do this one event, and we are now considering ourselves an authority on it. So the hot dog eating contest is just like, it's funny, and people laugh and kind of joke about it. But for us, like, we take that seriously. Like, when we're thrust into that role, like, my job is to do that event that I've never had to call before, and do it in a fashion that people who do tune in for that specific reason, they're going to feel comfortable with what we're presenting to them, and they're going to enjoy the experience. And I did it for 2 years while I was there, and I went into it with the same mindset that I would treat, you know, an NFL game that I was doing on radio that Sunday, or an NBA game that I was doing on Christmas on TV. Like, you have to know the material, you have to know the subjects, you have to know the context in which you're broadcasting it, and then you need to know the historical facts and the kind of historical events of that specific event. Like, I went back for 100 years and looked at Nathan's Coney Island, and I was like, all right, let me write down the history of Coney Island so I have that just in case. We're on the air for an hour. It's an hour-long show, and it's a 10-minute event. The last 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the show are the event itself, the main hot dog eating contest. So I may not know or may not use any of this stuff. It's the same way that when I do a, you know, Timberwolves Bulls game, like, I may not use 90% of the material, but I better have it just in case. Like, I need to have an understanding of the full scope. And even though only this sliver of the pie is going to be eaten, like, you still have to create the whole pie and you still have to cook it properly. So you have to have all the ingredients ready to go. And I just felt like if I didn't do that for a kind of a one-off event like that, then the people who tune in for that one-off event or that are in that world of competitive eating, which again, these are athletes in their own sense, and we have to treat them like that. And that's how I've tried to approach every event. And that's how we approach the hot dog eating contest. I know the history, I know the context, I know the participants, and I know the goal. And if we can connect all those things in a fluid and coherent fashion for that hour that you're watching, then we've done the event justice. And I one of the things that I always appreciated about my time at ESPN was I felt that I was given the opportunity to be versatile, and I hope that it came off that I treated all of those different events, women's college softball, hot dog eating contests, high school basketball games, along with NBA, Major League Baseball, college football, women's Final Four. I treated all of those events the same in terms of my attitude with them, how I presented them with the same level of enjoyment and enthusiasm that you would expect from somebody who has done the work. I hope that that's how it came off, because I took that very seriously. Part of it is just, I'm scared. I don't want to come off as somebody who doesn't care or didn't put the work in or didn't deserve the chair. You know, my first women's Final Four, that's a big event, and I didn't want to screw it up. That was the biggest thing for me. I just want to walk in and not bother anybody. I just want to fit in and do the job justice and then get out of the way. And that's how I felt every week, whatever the event was. And I think that's the attitude you have to have. You can't shortchange a specific event. Now, if it's a regular season game compared to like the NCAA championship, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be more weight on one than the other. There's going to be more storylines in one than the other. There's going to be more resources on one than the other. So yeah, it's going to feel a little bit different, but the process cannot change. I think that's something that everybody develops over time, and you'll do that in all of your positions. I'll do that in mine, and everybody's going to have to figure that out for whatever jobs they do over their careers. You have to formulate some semblance of a process so that when you are thrust into a new situation, you have a baseline to work off of. You have a blueprint that you feel comfortable with that's going to get you to getting the information and process that and formulate that and contextualize that in a way that you know when the finished product is put out, everybody's going to understand what you were trying to deliver in that moment.
Well, you said it earlier, you couldn't hit a 450-foot ball to center field. I couldn't either, but I also know that neither of us could probably eat as many hot dogs as they can, and I'm a big fan of hot dogs, so it is 100% a sport. 100% eating is a sport.
In athletic, we treated, I said they're athletes in their own sense. You can use the word competitors, athletes, participants, whatever word you feel comfortable with. Whatever it is, it's a physical act that they have to do, and they're doing it in a competitive manner. So I ate 2, I think, is the most I could eat in one sitting. So it's not, and they're good hot dogs. Like Nathan's hot dogs, I give them a lot of credit.
I'm sad to say I've ate like 8 in one sitting, so we'll just put that under the rug.
It's a respectable mark, and you should be damn proud that you were able to pull it.
Yeah. Well, I know you have a hot dog named after you, so we'll get to that later, but makes sense why you did the competition anyways. But I'm going to talk to you about radio because it's been a huge part of your journey so far. And you were the youngest play-by-play announcer to call a New Year's Six bowl game. You were on the national call for Auburn's infamous Kick Six, which are crazy events that like you get to cover. And you kind of talked about having like the baseline process for getting ready for an event or like the blueprint. How is your approach different from radio versus a TV broadcast? Is there a difference? What does that look like?
It's a little bit more streamlined in terms of the information that I'm documenting, like on my charts or whatever. It's a little bit less just because there's not enough time to really flesh out all of the things that you might have time to flesh out on a TV broadcast, because on TV, it's a visual medium. People can see it. So if you're not giving them descriptors, that's fine. They see it with their own eyes and they process it with their own minds. On radio, we've used the term theater of the mind. Like, you have to create the stage. You have to create the participants. You have to create the action. and you have to create the result, and you have to give that to an audience, and none of that exists until you give that to them. So you're not only the game and the broadcast, but you're the graphics package, and you're creating the pictures. So I think information wise, at least what I was writing down was less, because I knew I wasn't going to get to it, but I still went over it, and I still wanted to have that same sense for it. So the process of preparation is very similar. The execution of it is completely different. And I think that's one thing. I don't know if there is a difference between people who do this job that started in radio and then moved to TV, or that started in TV and then make an adjustment to radio. I'm not sure. I think there is a difference, but I don't know what that exactly is. And I'm somebody who started in radio. I started in college. I did most of my work in radio probably until I got to ESPN. And even then I was doing, by the end of it, I was probably doing about 60%, 40% TV radio, maybe 70-30. So it's still a good chunk of what I was doing. And it was football weekends early in the year were tough, because I would go do 2 weeks of TV broadcasts for college football, and then I go jump into my first NFL broadcast on the radio that second weekend. And at that adjustment period, like, it got easier as the years went on, but it was always something I had to go over and over. Like, don't forget, like, you can't just say, here's the snap. Remember to try to say bell tie snap. Here's a 5-step drop, not just the drop back. And these are all things that you think about early, and as you get back into a rhythm of doing it, become a little bit easier and easier. But what I noticed was some of my radio call, which is a little bit more kind of rapid fire. It's a little bit more of a rhythmic, cadence-based call, that would bleed over into my TV call. And that did not make me happy, because I was trying to give a very specific call on TV compared to a very specific call on radio. And, if a player makes a corner 3 to win the game, you have to say, here's Smith dribbling right wing, angles off to the right corner, a fading 3 at the buzzer, in the air, and go, like, you're giving all these little descriptors. Whereas on TV, I may just say, here's Smith for the win, and it goes down and you make the call, and that's it. Like, they're very nuanced and specific differences, calling a game on radio and calling a game on TV, and the priorities are completely different. The economy of words is drastically different. The structure of when you say certain things and how you storytell is drastically different. And the pacing is a lot different. TV is a relaxed medium in comparison to radio. TV is a cool medium. Radio is a hot medium, and you have to be even with the temperature of both of those mediums. So having both of those skill sets develop over a long period of time is something I'm thankful to have had. Some of the biggest games I've ever called have been on radio, and those games that I called on radio gave me and afforded me the opportunities to eventually call those sports and call those bigger events on the TV side, which now I get to do.
What do you think, like, for someone who wants to get into play-by-play, whether it's radio or TV, I know you had the opportunities you did in college, but say someone is interested in doing this, what would you say is the best way to get into doing play-by-play, or like get practice at it? Because like that's something with all this coronavirus that's like, okay, sideline reporters may go away. I hope pray they don't. But right. It's like, how could I shift myself to, try and do play-by-play? I was a former soccer player, so maybe that would be an avenue. So what are some ways you think that people could get practice at doing play-by-play if they don't have the opportunity to be in front of a camera and actually doing it for a live event?
That's one thing that that you do get is you can sit at home and watch a game and call the game as if you were on radio. You can't do that for TV, because TV is a massive group. There's a lot of people, that make all of that work. On radio, there's like 3 or 4 of us. It's play-by-play, an analyst, a producer, and an engineer, if that. So, if there's only 4 people, you're doing the bulk of the work, you can practice that in a lot easier of a fashion watching a game on TV or watching something on YouTube. Like, harder to do that specifically for TV, to practice that in a live setting. So, those opportunities are out there. I did the same thing. I was in my parents' house when I was 21 watching the NBA playoffs and just, all right, let me take my phone out and record a voice memo of me just doing 5 minutes and see if it's good. All right, this wasn't good. I can work on this. I would do that all the time. And it was important for me and my own growth and my own development, just to self-critique and listen back and go, all right, this sounds good, or this sounds bad, or I don't like that I use the same word 2 times, or whatever it may be. Harder to do that on TV. So I think that's one way to do it. In terms of opportunities, local radio has not gone away. And I don't think games on the radio, and maybe this is wishful thinking the same way, you were talking about reporting. I'm very hopeful that radio broadcasts don't go away. Now, they may not be on traditional radio down the line, but I don't think those audio broadcasts will go away, because it's just, you can't watch. It's not good to watch TV in your car, like when you're driving. So, that's
not for the safety of others. No,
not for the safety of others. Like, it's not good. Not a good thing. It's not, like that. There's still a specific area that is necessary to grow a fan base. Like, teams still need to grow their fan bases and still need to attract people. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to just have them be exposed to games. And when they can't visually be exposed to that, they can do that in an audio setting. So my hope is that those don't go away. I don't think that local radio is going to go away. I think high school games are still going to be put on radio in small towns across this country, and obviously big cities too, but especially small towns. Local broadcasts for colleges aren't going to go away, even though they're becoming more simulcast. There's more TV opportunities, especially at bigger schools. But go to an NAIA school. They may not have the budget to do a 5-camera shot of a broadcast of a college basketball game, and they may not have the personnel to pay to direct and produce and run the cameras. So what's the easier way to do it? Well, let's make sure we have at least an audio broadcast of this, so parents and family and friends and whoever wants to listen can listen to these games. And that's not going to go away. So still kind of working on the local end of things is still going to be out there for people to pursue. And there are going to be people, as technology develops, as TV and as visual mediums become more and more part of our lives, I think there will be less and less people pursuing radio. And that's still going to be a space that affords people opportunities. You were talking about the male-female dynamic, and I understand that it's largely male on the play-by-play side, but look at somebody like a Melanie Newman, who's now created a path for herself in minor league baseball and eventually into the majors. And she's doing multiple things. She's doing reporting, she's doing TV stuff, and she's doing radio broadcasts. There's still a lot of paths that can be forged from an audio perspective, and I don't want people to lose that. And then for me personally, I think it was really important for me, just for me, I don't know the difference, but to start in radio as a play-by-play announcer, because you learn so much about structure and timing, especially because the game has to take precedence on radio, because you have to create all of this. You have to create the game. So the game itself is the most important thing to document. And you can't get caught up in the things that you might have space to do on TV in terms of telling a really long story or giving some context to that. You have to be quicker, and you have to know how much time is going to take place between this pitcher's first pitch and their next pitch. If it's David Price, who takes 26 seconds between pitches, great. If it's Clayton Kershaw, it takes 19. All right, I need to be a little bit more economical with that, and understanding the timing of that and understanding the rhythm and cadence of those specific circumstances has only helped me. It's helped me become a better now TV broadcaster, because I can anticipate better. I understand the timing of when big things may happen. So I think there's still paths to be forged on the audio side of things. And I think there's still major opportunity going forward for a lot of different people.
Well, you're still forging your own path right now. And you switched from ESPN to Fox Sports last year, and to do play-by-play for their MLB, NFL, college basketball coverage. But then in addition to that, you also do play-by-play for the Chicago Bulls. And you mentioned your versatility earlier today. And I wanted to circle back around to that, because it's a simple question. And it's so important in this industry to be that person that people can be like, oh, well, hey, he can do that. Or, hey, oh, no, I know she can do that. So how do you stay on top of everything when you're covering so many different high profile sports and events? What's the key for you?
I mean, I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to formulate my preparation on a daily basis. This is a daily job, and it's a year-round job. Now, how much you put in every single day is gonna defer. It's gonna be different depending on the day and depending on where you're at mentally and physically and all that stuff, and what the schedule is like. I've got my schedule behind me right now. That's all of it. So that's the month of April and May. And I'm looking around. I'm like, all right.
You're not busy at all. You're not busy at all. I feel like you have so much free time.
Not a lot of days. But like, especially in a compacted season like the NBA is having right now, and I call NBA games on the side nationally as well for a VR outlet. Like, we're jamming a lot of events in. Now, the luxury to that is I don't have to prepare a lot of stuff for the Bulls every day. It's only it's reading every day and staying up to date on the individual daily storylines for the team, and then catching up on all the other teams that the Bulls play or that I have to cover nationally. So I know all of that is connected. So I have a daily diary that I keep, just whatever I come up with. It might be 10 notes on one day. It might be one on another day, on an off day or something, but it's just a diary that I've started to keep every day since I started doing this job of not just the Bulls, but the NBA. All right, this happened last night. We can talk about this on the broadcast. Oh, this was the result of this Lakers Celtics game. Does that affect the Bulls in any way? All right, we can talk about that. And then I go see, I had Charlotte, New York on Tuesday night. The Bulls are playing Charlotte tonight. So I didn't have to do a lot of work this morning to prepare for that game. So today's, an easier day in that sense. It's a daily adjustment, and it's a daily, a journal of each day in this business. And then for baseball, which is such a difficult sport to cover if you're not in it day to day, because it's such a long season and there's so many differing storylines for so many teams, every week at least once, if not twice, I'll go over a bunch of box scores. I'll go through a bunch of websites. I'll go through a bunch of stories. And I may not go deep diving into all of them because I'm only going to call 10 to 15 baseball games this season, maybe closer to 20 if that. But that's about it. And I'm not going to go and run myself into the ground to prepare for my 15 to 20 games, but I have to be up on it on a daily basis because it is such a large tapestry that you're trying to navigate through. So that's been part of my process now the last few years of trying to stay up to date when I don't call as many baseball games. The NFL is a little bit different because there's so much written about it, and it is truly a week-to-week sport. Every week is so impactful. So when you're in the midst of preparing for your NFL game that week, like, we're going to learn a lot about the rest of the league anyway. So it's almost a little bit easier in that sense, even though football is such a grand sport to cover. You're very focused on the individual games themselves, whereas baseball, basketball, I'm sure hockey's this way because they're longer seasons with a lot of games. There's a lot of connectivity with all the games. So you have to be up on it on a day-to-day basis. And that's on top of my daily game preparation, my charts, my boards, how I structure all that prep. This is now the process that I'm formulating for this schedule now. And I'm still learning that. I'm going into year 2 at Fox, and next year will be year 2 with the Bulls. So I'm learning that as I go as well.
Well, it's a question I always ask, like broadcasters. I used to shadow a lot of sideline reporters when I was in college, and it was always a question. I was like, how do you prepare? Because I love to see the thought processes from different people. And someone, Kevin Burkhardt, you might know him a little bit. I interned at Fox Sports on MLB Whip Around going into my senior year of college. And so we sat down and I asked him how he prepared for things. And he showed me on like OneNote how he, has all this stuff written out for each team and like player tabs and all this stuff. And it was mind blowing to me because I was like, wow, this is so organized. This is great. And then I implemented that and it made my broadcast better when I was a senior in college. And so it's just so interesting to see how everyone prepares for everything. And I know another thing someone told me, because I was always like, as a young broadcaster trying to get into this industry, I'm like, how do they know everything? Because people don't know everything, but they sure make it seem like they know everything. And one of the best pieces of advice that it was Jenny Dell she gave to me was just follow all the news outlets, follow ESPN, follow Bleacher Report. And it seems so simple, but you go and you look on there and you're like, dang, they tweet like every second of every day. So you're going to be consumed with sports. And it started to just consume my life, what I was consuming on social media, because you're on it all the time. My parents were like, how do you know that? Like, where did you find that from? And it's like, it's the simplest of things that can make the biggest difference, just the little changes to things.
It's how I learned to curate. And I've been on Twitter for, since it started basically. And it was originally just like a way to talk to friends or say, funny things to each other. And then as I started at ESPN and I started following the beat writers of the team that week that I was covering for a football or basketball game, and I started covering or started following like the individual accounts of programs. And as that has developed over the last 10 years, like team accounts put out more story-based stuff, more stat-based stuff. They do a lot of that now too. The beat writers that are out there, there's so much information, especially in professional sports. There's so many stories and so many stats that you can formulate, that following all of these people, it's not just now to say, oh, something pops up. No, I'm paying attention. If there's a story about a Cleveland baseball player, and I may have Cleveland in 2 months, let me bookmark that and store that away, or take that link and put it into my OneNote diary that I have every week. Let me put that in just in case that pops up, because if he's still playing, I remember seeing this from 2 months ago. And I can run through that story during the week of the game and say, oh, this is great. These are a couple of notes that I can put together. And even though the story's from April and I might be covering the team in June, well, what's different now? It was red hot in April. Is he still red hot now? Or how has the season gone? And you can better formulate the story of that player's season, which here's the one thing that I'm starting to figure out a little bit. And this is a balance of now doing a local team and then doing national games. So your process changes a little bit. What I've noticed is fans of teams that you're covering nationally, they don't necessarily care that every nuanced detail of that player's story, but they want to know that you at least have read it or acknowledge it or understand why something is happening and how it applies to the greater context. So I may not know everything about Wilson Contreras' swing for the Cubs. I may not know everything about that, but if I cover a Cubs game and there's something written about that in April, I can at least say, this guy was swinging a red-hot bat in April. He made a lot of adjustments with the hitting coach. 2 months later, he has fallen off a little bit, but he's still hitting at a career rate. I've said 2 sentences about that player, but I've acknowledged what hardcore fans of that team already know. Oh, yeah, I remember when Wilson was hot in April. And I've also acknowledged it to casual fans who haven't watched a lot of the Cubs this year. And they go, oh, okay, so Contreras was hot early and he's hitting well for the majority of the year. 2 sentences is all it took. But that comes from looking at something in April and revisiting it in June. And that's the type of narrative that you're kind of building, not only for your preparation, but for yourself, for your own knowledge and security for fans who are going to critique your performance on a national stage. So that's become more of a process thing that I've implemented in the last couple of years as I learn more and I step into this new role. My role with the Bulls is different than my role with Fox, and how I cover games is very different with the Bulls than how I might cover a national basketball game or a Major League Baseball game with Fox. And that's still something that's going to continue to develop and process and grow over the coming years, over the next 20 years. Who knows? It's going to change a lot.
Well, you mentioned Twitter, and, I mentioned it on last week's episode. I'm not a huge fan of social media. I know I have to have it to make my mark in this crazy world and, put myself out there. But I have to ask you about how in 2019 on Twitter, when you had the positive notes about your colleagues, and I remember seeing it and was like, this is really cool. Like, this is awesome that you're taking the time to acknowledge your colleagues and just put some positivity out into the world. And, we talked about it earlier in the comparison game and everything. What helps you keep your head above all that and just focus on the good that this industry has to offer? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the negativity and the comparison.
Yeah, comparison is the thief of joy is the famous quote, right? That's very fitting, especially in this business, because we talked about how competitive it is and how at times it can be a little bit cutthroat. And I really do think it's getting better. And I attribute that a lot to the younger people who are getting into this business now. And I don't think I'd like to consider myself part of the younger set, but I know there's a generation of broadcasters younger than my current age group. I know that. And I think they seemingly, maybe this is just a surface level thing, but on the surface, they seem a lot more supportive of one another. And I was thankful that I found my group, my tribe, so to speak, in this business, because that's what we were about. Joe and Wayne and everybody else who I could count. There's a 1,000 people as part of this whole group that I've made friends with and become fans of professionally over the years. But we're all very supportive of each other. And part of it is because the industry has grown. There's a lot more opportunity now than there ever has been, but it's also harder to step yourself. And that's where some of that competitiveness still comes in, where how has this person separated themselves from me? I'm good at this too. I'm sure that there are still instances that have popped up and will continue to pop up where even if I'm not being directly compared to somebody, you're going to feel like you are. Because this person got recognized for this. Well, I've done the same things. I'm not getting recognized. That's hard. That's a hard thing to battle. And I don't know if that ever really goes away for competitive people in general. I don't know if that'll ever truly go away for me. But one thing I'm starting to figure out is, and this helped when I had that thread, just talking about colleagues and the good things that they do. People do recognize the work that you're putting in. Somewhere, someone is recognizing your work. And if it's good work, people are going to recognize that. It's the old MSNBC to CNBC business term. It's called flight to quality. No matter what era we're in, no matter what the product is, whether it's the things you put out as a broadcaster, the content you put out as a creator, the book that you put out as a writer, whatever it is, if there's a quality to it, a certain baseline level of quality, people will gravitate towards it. That will never stop happening. People appreciate quality. And I think when I got to a point where I felt comfortable enough in my own skin doing this job, where I felt like I sounded like me rather than an amalgamation of the 50 broadcasters that I grew up watching, where I finally felt like, no, this is my personality that is blended with my skill set that I've created and curated over 15 years of doing this. When I finally felt that, and it didn't really feel that way maybe until my late 20s, early 30s, and mind you, I've been doing it nationally at that point for 6-7 years. So a lot of eyeballs and a lot of events. It finally got to that point where I'm like, what I'm doing is good. There's a baseline level of quality. And my goal now, as I get further and further in this business, is not to necessarily have to readjust everything I'm doing. It's fine tuning and raising the baseline level of quality that I come into every broadcast with. The reason that people in their 50s and 60s that are play-by-play announcers, the Beth Mowins of the world, the Chris Fowlers of the world, even Vern Lundquist, Brad Nessler, all these big names that have been doing it for a long time, they've been doing it so long that their baseline level of quality goes up every single year. And they know that no matter what they do and what their process is, that process will get them to this specific level. And then everything they do beyond that for that game or how the game goes will elevate that broadcast. And I finally got to that point where I felt comfortable in that. And when you feel comfortable in your own skin, you recognize that in everybody else. You recognize confidence in another person. I think that's a human trait, not just a broadcasting trait. So I finally felt comfortable in my own job, in my own abilities, in my own presentation of how I did this, to the point where I said, you know what, I recognize that in that person, and I recognize this ability in the other person, and I have to stop worrying, or I don't have to worry about how I'm doing this anymore. That's probably the wrong way to say that. I worry every day about how I do this. I know you do too, but I got to a point of comfort and confidence that was curated over a long period of time that finally allowed me to look at other people and say, that person's also good, and I hope you recognize that. And this person is exceptional at what they do, and I hope that you recognize that moment that we all just witnessed together collectively on Twitter while watching this big game, I hope you recognize the work that went into that and how good that person is at what they do. I remember saying that during the women's Final Four this year, which again, that was my big event. when I closed out at ESPN. And going back and watching that now as not being an employee of ESPN, seeing my friends do that job with somebody else in the play-by-play chair, Ryan Rucco, who's another really good friend of mine who I lean on in a lot of ways. I was so proud to watch them do that broadcast. And I remember watching Holly Rowe do a story and just went, I hope you all recognize how good she is at her job, because I've seen the process that makes her that damn good. And now she's applying that on the biggest stage for the widest audience. And all of you are like, I can't believe she just told that amazing story. And I go, I can believe that because I've seen how it works. And I hope all of you recognize that. And it becomes easier and easier the more confident you become in your own self.
Well, I think it's really cool on your part. Especially that Twitter thread. I remember I was just taken aback because you just don't see that very often. And so props to you. I know you do it for for your colleagues and to give them positive notes. But to me, that stood out so much. And I was like, okay, this guy's cool. Like he supports people and he is really good at his job. And I think that's something that as a young broadcaster, that's why you're someone who I, along with so many others, look up to, because it shows and we notice it. So thank you for that and for being such a good role model for us young broadcasters.
Really kind of you to say. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, it's time for quick hits, our last segment. Make it a little fun here at the end. Just a couple questions for you to get outside of broadcasting. So first question for you. I've learned that you like to play the guitar. So what is your favorite song to play on it?
Oh man, that's a great question. It's sitting right over there. In fact, I got obsessed with A Star Is Born, the remake of it, and I learned how to play Maybe It's Time by Brad. The Jason Isbell song that Bradley Cooper performed. So it's just it's a fairly recent song, but I find myself like playing it at 5 to 10 minute intervals just about every day or every couple of days. And it's just the one that's kind of ingrained into your own head. Like a lot of people learn songs and you learn chords and you just figure out which chords are which songs. And that's how you learn how to play the guitar. It's not exceptionally hard, but that song just is a very calming, like if I'm stressed out or I've got a lot of work to do and I just want to take a break, like that's easy. 5-10 minutes, go over there. I know exactly where my fingers go. I know exactly what the strumming pattern is. And I play it and it calms me down a little bit. And that's become over the last couple of years, just my favorite song to play. So
question number 2, what is your favorite Netflix series?
Man, another great one. There's so many. I definitely loved The Queen's Gambit when it was out. I was obsessed with that I watched that twice. The series I always go back to though is it's the show I'm Sorry, and I just finished that.
I have watched that. It is fantastic. My dad showed it to me, and I was like, "Dude, what is this?" Like, and then I watch it. I'm like, "Oh, I get why you watch it."
The pattern is clearly developing, where it's just like I go to comfort stuff, and that's a comfort series. It's fast, it's quick, it's hilarious. It's one of those things where I'll put it on in the background if I'm prepping for something. I just need some background noise, and it just always. So right now, I'm sure that'll change at some point, but right now it's I'm Sorry.
Question number 3. You're known to be quite the foodie along with Molly McGrath. What is your favorite food?
Hard for me not to say tacos here. If I go with the most, I know it's a very, very basic answer, but I think it's the perfect food. It's whatever level of vegetables you want, and it's meat and cheese and a tortilla, and it's
fairly healthy. Fairly healthy.
You can make it healthy. You can make it disgusting for you. You can go the route of you can go vegan on it, or you can go to Torchy's and put as much cheese sauce and fried chicken on one as you want to. And I think it's just not just the perfect food, it's the perfect delivery system for a food.
I vividly remember, and of course I say I vividly, I don't remember the exact game and who was playing, but I vividly remember watching the broadcast of you guys getting the plate of tacos and Molly eating it on the sideline, because I think I shadowed her at K-State that same season. And I was like, this is the ideal situation as a broadcaster. You get platters of food just brought to you in the booth or on the sideline, and you get to eat on air. Like this is why I want to be in broadcasting right here.
If you were to give that as the example to somebody who wanted to do the job, then literally everybody would want to do the job.
Everyone.
So I feel like we gave an unfair presentation of what the job really entails. Molly obviously works her ass off and is one of the hardest working people I know and have ever met. And is one of my great friends in this business. But yeah, we kind of skewed people's perspectives of it where we just show up for a football game where we're eating tacos in the booth and on the field.
She's fantastic. And I just think that, you guys already are great broadcasters. You get food on top of it. I mean, you can't get a better job than that. But question number 4, what is the most fun event you have worked?
Oh, God. It's an impossible question. To narrow down to one. I don't think I could ever narrow it down to one. Which is, again, a thing that is a very fortunate thing to say. It's a thing that's said from a position of luxury, honestly. I've been afforded, like you said earlier, I've been afforded so many cool opportunities, and I've covered NBA playoff games with LeBron James hitting buzzer beaters. I've had the women's Final Four where, it's been, I did 6 games at the women's Final Four in my 2 years doing it. And all 6 were absolute barn burners of games, including, game winners for the national championship, the Iron Bowl that you mentioned earlier, a dozen college football games that all had an incredible moment or an incredible crowd in the background of it. I've covered Major League Baseball playoffs on the radio and on TV now, and it's, there's nothing that feels like a playoff baseball game. Like the atmospheres that I've been in for some of these, for wild card games and things like that are just the level of intensity is so high. So I can't narrow it down. I wish I could. But
well, you kind of gave us a good encompassing description of all the things you have done. So that will suffice as your answer.
I'm very lucky that I've been there for some moments like that.
Last question for you. Oh, I mentioned it earlier. Give us a quick rundown of the hot dog that's named after you and how that came about.
So I had a friend of mine that used to work at ESPN and left the TV business to make hot dogs and opened up a hot dog shop in Orlando. And he and I had always kept in touch, and he was going to be at the Citrus Bowl when he first started up this venture, and he was selling hot dogs at the Citrus Bowl, and he saw that I was doing the game. He's like, I'm going to name a hot dog after you for the day, since you're going to be there, and I think you should come by.
Just for the day, no longer than the day, just the day.
Still there. It might be. If it is, great. If not, at least I had one for a day. And
that's something really cool to put on your resume.
Absolutely.
Hot dog named after me for a day.
I will not. I always wanted, I hope that happens in Chicago one day. This is the level of fame I hope to achieve. I just want one, restaurant to just be we have a funny name for this sandwich and it fits your name and we're just going to name the sandwich after you. That's all I'm seeking. I don't need anything beyond that. I'm not here for the money. I'm not here for the exposure. Just name a sandwich at some point. I should say it this way. I hope I do enough in this business to where somebody names a sandwich after me. That's all I really want. So the El Amin, which I guess technically it's El Amin because the Amin sounds stupid. So El Amin was a hot dog with barbecue sauce, tahini, Fritos. It's a spicy barbecue sauce, tahini, Fritos, and jalapeno. And I frankly, it was delicious. I'm not saying I'm delicious. I'm saying the hot dog that was named after me for one day is delicious. And if you run into this joint in Orlando at some point, please support my friend Jordan and buy the hot dog or ask him for it and see if he makes it for you because I'm sure he will.
So you're a spicy kind of person because that hot dog seems like it would immediately make tears come to my eyes.
I don't think it's that bad. Again, I'm Pakistani, but I grew up on spicy food. Everything that my mom ever made and still makes to this day has a significant kick to it. So when I brought friends over or have brought them food that my mom has made, I always have to warn them right out of the gate, just be very, very careful with this. And
have the water ready.
have some milk, have something ready to go because it might get a little intense. So for me, it's almost second nature at this point.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on The Rise today. I had such a great time chatting with you, and I really appreciate all of your advice. And I know that it will go such a long way for the young broadcasters listening. So thank you again.
Thank you for the time, Bridget. It was a great conversation. Little